I know what you're thinking about the hypothetical, but I seriously need help. I'm 24, and after college, my girlfriend moved in with me. We had settled on the East Coast, since her folks were Midwest religious types that had helicopter parented her for most of her life. They were initially upset, but she assured them she'd call them frequently. My girlfriend, Sarah, loved the water, so we rented an apartment in a rainy town near a lake. The town was small and quiet, which allowed us to enjoy each other's company more, especially during the rainy season, where storms prevented any attempt to spend any meaningful time outdoors. When it wasn't raining, I worked at a local animal shelter. I was the closest the small town had to a legitimate vet, but most of my time was spent telling people not to feed their dogs grapes and dog sitting when my neighbors left town on vacation. Even after moving away, it seemed like Sarah's parents were still a huge part of her life. They would call constantly, every Sunday, for 3 to 4 hours, talking about how great their church experience was, asking when the last time she had been, and again, re-emphasizing how great their church experience was. She'd roll her eyes, and figuring it'd be another long call, I'd go cook or read while they prayed with her over the phone. The issue started when Sarah stopped talking to her parents regularly. The first time it happened, I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. If anything, Sarah seemed more lively than usual after not answering their call. Since the rainy season was upon us and would not facilitate a car ride to the next town over for hot coals and cucumber eye coverings, we ended up doing an impromptu spa day with our newfound extra time. We threw some damp towels in the dryer, lit some candles, and settled down for a cozy day in, complete with cotton terry robes. Sometime after, during our exfoliation, I noticed something weird was going on with Sarah's leg. She was using a normal amount of force, but it seemed like more skin than normal was coming loose with each movement of the washcloth. I mentioned it in passing, but she laughed it off, citing my masculinity as a direct link to my lack of spa experience. Figuring that she knew better than me, we continued our spa day and the following week as usual. This weekend, I'd be taking home Rascal, a tiny white chihuahua who had outlived the median lifespan of its already long-lived breed by about 10 years. His owner was an older woman who had paid me with 3 potted plants, as I had mentioned that our apartment needed some liveliness to complete the space. I got home today, Friday, shaking off my umbrella and setting Rascal down, who also shook himself dry, even though he had been protected from the rain. I was surprised to find that Sarah was already asleep, tucked tight underneath our bed's blankets. As I slowly closed the door to our room, I heard a buzzing coming from our kitchen table. To my surprise, it was Sarah's father, oddly calling on a Friday instead of the usual Sunday post-church powwow. "Is Sarah with you?" he asked immediately upon my answering. Yes, she is. Is everything all right over there?" I cautiously replied. I didn't know what level of communication Sarah wanted to keep with her parents, so I kept my replies short, reminding myself to ask her why she hadn't been chatting with them recently. He cut me off during one of my vague replies. "How does her skin feel?" Now, I paused, a bit unnerved by the directness of the question, and sputtered, "No, I haven't run into any trouble as of late." Now, he paused, and I waited for a response, looking into the blank, crusty white eyes of Rascal staring in my general direction. "We'll be there by Sunday," and hung up before I could ask him anything else. I returned to the bedroom, ready to inform Sarah of what had just transpired, but only a patch of dark gray was left on our bed. I turned and saw a trail of wet footprints leading towards the bathroom. I slowly opened the door to a room full of steam, with Sarah standing there, freshly showered. She hugged me, her cold, wet hair falling around my arms. She told me she'd been tired recently and that
I needed something to wake me up.
She smiled at me and cocked her head.
What's wrong, Cinnabon?
We have nicknames for each other. It's nothing, Apple Fritter, as I embraced her back, wondering why her neck was so wrinkled and red even after a shower, and why the bed was wet prior to her showering. And then she left change, sliding from my grasp with an unusual ease, which I chalked up to our recent spa day. She had meticulously waxed for about 2 hours, wanting to silk up her skin for me. After returning to the bedroom, she had quickly fallen back asleep. I chuckled, and then noticed a white flake of something coming off her cheek. Stepping closer, it looked as if like a sticky note-sized translucent scab had formed on her face. I went to brush it away, but doing so revealed an indent in her skin where the scab had peeled away. Looking closer, she now had roughly a half-inch of dead skin covering her entire body like shrink wrap. I tried jostling her awake, but she remained asleep, not reacting to any sounds or stimuli. I frantically attempted to pry off the extra skin, and to my surprise, it peeled off easily, letting loose a spurt of clear liquid that was trapped inside the skin barrier. I threw the sheets to the side, gasping in shock as it revealed more changes that had been taking place while I was worried about freeing her face. The webs of her fingers had each extended up to her distal joints, and from what I could make out, her legs had almost completely fused together. I stumbled backwards and raced to the kitchen to get ice water as my last option for waking her up. I quickly filled up a bowl of water and ice and sprinted back to the room when I heard a loud crash from the bedroom. Jolting open the door, I found that Sarah had slid off the bed and was now completely encased in a thick, rubbery layer of skin. I could barely see her on the inside. Still not moving. I desperately hurled the ice water on her in an attempt to wake her up, but to no avail. She remained motionless. I curled over her, frantically thinking of what to do next. The rain continued to pour down outside my window, and a sudden flash of lightning snapped me out of my tunnel vision. Thinking back to my undergrad, I remembered another technique to force someone out of an unresponsive state. Placing my curled fist to where I expected her sternum to be, I pushed down in a hard, rubbing motion. To my shock, her rib cage shifted. Not slightly, but fully avoided my forearm as it passed through on its way to the ground. Confused, I took a step back to see that she had fully transitioned into what looked like an enormous earthworm. Sarah was originally about 5'2" with dark hair and light blue eyes. She laid before me now as a 12-foot-long, thin mass of skin and flesh, now rhythmically writhing on the floor of our apartment, just sloshing around in the mix of clear and crimson bodily fluid that now soaked the center of the bedroom's carpet. The movement looked as if someone was sealed in a large sleeping bag and was now trying desperately to escape, internal limbs stretching her outer layer of skin and then quickly receding. I stood back as the motion was erratic and she crashed against the bedroom furniture violently. It would have alerted the neighbors to a disturbance if it wasn't for the overpowering sound of rain against the building. I heard a screech, and as I snapped my head up, I could see Rascal had latched onto the side of Sarah and drew blood where his teeth had sunken into her soft pink flesh. I scrambled over and quickly pried his mouth open, releasing her from his grasp. He suddenly stopped growling and began barking in a panic. I looked upwards to see Sarah had coiled vertically like a cobra, steadying itself to strike. I dove sideways, but I lost my grip of Rascal, who let out a final yelp before being mashed into the carpet. Sarah then unfurled from her position and began winding herself closer to where I sat, fearfully crouched in a corner of the room. The head of Sarah's body slowly extended and retracted, finally reaching out to me as she closed the distance between us. I recoiled, holding my arms and legs tightly together, attempting to make myself as small as possible. To my surprise, the mouth began to gently coil around me, seemingly smelling or tasting for something it wanted. It ended up encircling my hand, which had been slightly cut when I opened Rascal's jaw a few moments prior. The lips pulsed, and I felt a slight pull of suction, which quickly became stronger, now feeling more like a vacuum. I could feel the once small wound open up as my body strained to keep my blood from being wrenched out of me. I slowly faded away into darkness, fainting from the riverine sensation of blood coursing out of my body. I woke up to a pitch-black room. Moving my legs slightly, I recognized the creak of my bed's mattress springs. As I reached to turn on the bedside lamp, I realized that Sarah was still firmly attached to my hand. I slowly flicked on the lamp and I stared in shock as my own arm had grown emaciated and weak from being drained. I stumbled to my feet, slowly dragging along Sarah to the kitchen in a survival-fueled daze. I weakly picked up a bag of salt and returned to the bedroom. I knocked over a dresser onto our bed and pushed Sarah's engorged body underneath. I then carefully spread the salt around either side of the bed, making sure not to let any touch her. Yet. Bracing myself, I flung the remaining crystals directly onto Sarah's new head, shoving it under the bed and connecting the lines of salt I had left open. To my knowledge, earthworms don't normally make noises, but the guttural moan that originated from under the bed was neither annelid nor human. She thrashed about for the next hour or so, desperately trying to remove the salt from her skin and escape the makeshift prison I had crafted to contain her. I can hear her sliding back and forth across her own skin, coiling tightly and occasionally bumping into the bed frame and wall. I bandaged my hand, reapplied salt around the bed, and now I'm typing this post, searching for answers or help as to what is happening. Does anyone have advice on how to proceed? It's Friday night, and I likely won't be going back into work until I can sort this out. Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to my narration of this wonderful story. Don't forget to support the author, which I have linked in the description, as well as the original story. And I just want to give a quick shout out to my patrons, Scott, Old Penguin, Ellie Hutmeyer, Mr. Sankofa, Austin My Love, Rinku Star, William Hartley, Cupcake Hips, Alonzo, Icy Narrates, Jesse Hartley, Eric Cifuentes, Lawrence Wallen, and Melissa Perez. I also try to link a different charity or a different cause every month and maybe a little more. So don't forget to check out the description to support the author of the story you just listened to and to maybe help somebody else out, even if it's just $1. As always, if you guys have a prayer request, please let me know in the comments, shoot me a message on Discord. I would love to know how I can be praying for you. Thank you guys so much. God bless, and I'll see you in the next video.